Hey, what's up, everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be reading The Chimera Secret. So, The Chimera Secret is a science fiction thriller novel written by Dean Crawford, and basically kind of takes place between two locations. One of being like Washington, D.C., and a national park in Idaho. And essentially, in Idaho, there is a series of killings and disappearances, and it looks like something, or the reports are of something large perpetrating these murders, these killings, and killing in a very brutish and savage fashion, essentially. And from this point on in the story, it kind of creates like a spiral, almost like you're going down a rabbit hole from basically like right off the beginning, like this killing from this thing, which is introduced pretty much right off the bat in the story, which is very interesting because usually in these kinds of stories, the thing that is doing the killing is left a lot more cryptic and left up to a lot more mystery, which granted they don't give it away what it is per se right away in the story, but you're introduced to it in a much more direct way than I think a lot of these kinds of stories normally do so. It was a bit of a surprise for me when I was reading it. I was like, oh wow, there it is. It's like, but from there it kind of deals a lot with, like, what you learn is that this creature, this animal, or animals, I should say, are in fact linked to a lot of our kind of mythology, a lot of North American mythology. And I won't give it away what it is because when I found out that what they were, what they were supposed to be, or what legend they were behind, was a bit of a surprise to me. So I won't spoil that. But when you kind of come across it, you're like, oh wow, that's clever. I never would have thought of that. And how they are linked to essentially this government experiment, and basically what they were being used for, and kind of the nefarious purposes of how that would affect the American population, the American people. This is kind of a bit of a throwback kind of novel to the good old days of evil governments with secret, covert experiments, creating monsters in the basement, and doing so all at the expense of all us wonderful taxpayers. So it felt kind of a bit more of like an older story, like the kinds of books I would grow up reading or the kinds of movies I grew up watching. So right away I was very drawn to it for that reason. I liked it. I love those kinds of stories. And it really is a story about, because again, this is one of those going to be one of those recommendation videos where I have to kind of tiptoe around a lot of the narrative, because this is very much a story about secrets, and divulging secrets and uncovering secrets, and the risk that comes with uncovering those secrets. So I can't want to give too much away, but what I do want to talk about is kind of my takeaway from this story, what it's really about. While on the surface it's about kind of a uncovering government projects and government secrets, it's really about us learning to kind of not fall into like a false sense of security in terms of feeling like there's always like Big Brother is taking care of you. I mean, for as much grief as we all like to give the government, and this isn't just America. Depending on where you are in the world, chances are a lot of places in the world, especially in the Western world, have this kind of fight the power mentality. Fuck the man, that whole thing. But at the end of the day, we rely more on the man than we do really go against it. It's great when you're a teenager and you want to listen to music, which is like, screw the government, screw that. But ultimately, we are very dependent and very subservient to the government, to the status quo, as it were. So what happens when, though, that status quo is essentially taking advantage of this almost blind obedience that we are all kind of conditioned to have? And this isn't meant to be a political, like, you shouldn't trust the government or you should trust. This is a story about, while it's good to have, well, it's fine to have authoritative figures in your life who are essentially put in place to kind of look out for you and kind of, are there to kind of instill policies for the betterment of society. We should not have that at the expense of our own awareness of things. Like, we should, as individuals, still serve as watchdogs for ourselves. We should still be able to, keep an eye on those who are keeping an eye on us. Not to the point of paranoia or conspiracy theory, which, even though this is what this book is about, It's very much saying take responsibility for yourself and never stop watching your own back, because it is when we all start to do that that it becomes very easy for these uh, individuals in power to take advantage of us and further agendas at the expense of those that they are essentially sworn to protect. That these projects and experiments really are all ultimately designed to protect the people who put them in office rather than just creating power for the sake of power at the expense of those who are they're supposed to protect with that power. It becomes a quest for power and not a utilizing it to protect anyone. Just more power. It becomes addictive. It becomes like a drug. So this is a story of like that being taken to the extreme. It's like what happens when you know the government is essentially the monster. When essentially the government is, or not the government as a whole, but people who are basically left unchecked because they are bringing about the promise of security and defense that'll protect everyone, and they're just left alone, left to their own devices, and they're able to kind of pursue this quest at the expense of anyone and anything, and that they, the end justifies the means, even though if the whole point is to protect or to safeguard its citizens, if to achieve that it is harming their citizens, doesn't it defeat the whole purpose? And that's what this story is really about. It is about we as people needing to not be led along like children. We all have grow up, and hopefully we have our parents there who will guide us, who will lead us. But just because your parents are your parents doesn't mean that they are infallible. Doesn't mean that they won't make mistakes, and doesn't mean that they might make decisions on your behalf that are in fact not in your best interest. And as you get older and as you become a teenager or a young adult, you need to be able to kind of discern for yourself what is right for you, what is best for you. That way, whether willingly or unwillingly, they cannot hurt you. And hopefully that's not a situation you're going through at home with your parents, your family, but just because they are your family, just because it is their responsibility to look out for you, doesn't mean they are incapable of doing something that will in fact hurt you. And you need to be kind of smart enough to be able to recognize when your parents are, just being parents and, grounding you or not letting you borrow the car or making you come home earlier than you would like to, versus them being abusive, for instance. So for me, this is really the takeaway for the story. It is realizing that it is so easy to just close your eyes and let somebody else take care of you, especially when that other person is promising to do just that. It's like, you don't worry about anything, don't ask questions, just walk forward, look straight, live your life, have fun, eat, drink, be merry. Don't worry about anything else. If you hear something off to the side, don't look, don't worry about it. We got this covered. We'll take care of you. And the price for that is just blind obedience. And when the price is blind obedience, that is usually kind of your first kind of like indication that maybe this isn't on the up and up. Maybe these people are not on the level, not entirely. And again, this book doesn't paint the entire government as just this evil, authoritarian, entity that is just going to just crush the populace underfoot to achieve its own quest for power and greatness. Not at all. But it is saying that within the government, there are organizations that have been left unchecked. And because of that, they continue to push their limits, push the boundaries, and be like a child who is never punished or scolded for pushing the boundaries. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing until it gets to a point where they've crossed so many lines that, it is past the point of no return, well past the point of no return, especially within the context of this narrative. So it's really a story about us needing to keep our wits about us, and never losing the ability to think for ourselves. That doesn't mean giving the conspiracy theories and deny moon landings and thinking the earth is flat and that, we're all, making that round earth money to keep you thinking. It's nothing that extreme, but just because someone's job is to protect you doesn't mean they are above fault. And because they are people themselves Doesn't mean they might not make a mistake. Doesn't mean they might not have an agenda. Doesn't mean they might not be kind of led astray themselves and go down a path that is perhaps not what's best for all of us. But if left unchecked, they'll continue down that path because there's nobody there to kind of stay. So, hey, wait a minute, this isn't cool. Stop it. They're just keep going. And like I said, the ends justify the means, right? And in doing so, they will be able to justify terrible things because they feel that, well, once this is all said and done, it'll save more lives than it will have hurt. But leading to that, there is a trail of bodies. So this is really a story about just never losing the ability to look after yourself. Never losing the ability, or the will, I should say, to ask questions. Doesn't mean everyone's up to no good. Just because something might look sketchy doesn't mean it necessarily is. But ask. Look into it. That way, just in case it is, or just in case it's something that could go down that road, you can maybe get ahead of it. Maybe stop before it gets there. If we all as a whole kind of just, like I said, keep our wits about us, and keep an eye on those who are keeping an eye on us. And it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. They have the power to keep us safe, but it's just to make sure that they don't misuse that power. We have the numbers, so keep an eye on them. So the masses keep an eye on the power, and the power keeps an eye on the masses. That's where our strengths come from. So as long as we keep doing that, we keep each other in check, and we can all move forward, and we all can kind of stay on the up and up. But when one loses kind of sight of the other, that's when things can go awry. And that's kind of what this story does, and a kind of very kind of classic 80s style, again, government organization up to no good, creature story. Like it reminded me a little bit of Dean Koontz's Watchers, which I talked about on this show. So it was very much in that kind of vein. I mean, it's not a copy of that, and it is different in its own right. But it kind of, if there was like a subgenre of these kinds of stories, these two would inhabit it quite comfortably and be, good bedfellows. So if you like Watchers and you enjoy that kind of story, I think this is a great read because, again, it feels like it belongs in that genre while still being original and telling its own unique story and kind of having its own unique dialogue that makes you think. And again, it's interesting to read a story like that, like in today's world where, especially in the Western world, there is a lot of, unrest with like political powers and governments, and regardless of what side of the line you stand on, there is some there is some friction going on in the world at the moment. So weirdly enough, while this is very much a science fiction story and plays more on the fantastical, it still deals with issues of us being able to trust the powers that be, and that kind of fear and paranoia that comes with once we kind of start realizing that, oh man, maybe we let things go astray too long. Now we're paranoid. Now we're weirded out because we don't know what they're up to and how far they've gone and how far they're willing to go. And this story really plays upon that fear and that paranoia and why it's so important to prevent that from happening, while it's so important to just, everyone needs to keep tabs on everyone. Yes, the government does it on its people, but the people need to do it on the government as well. That way nobody, gets ahead of themselves too much. Everyone, has something to gain from the other, and everyone has something to lose at the expense because of the other. So it kind of keeps everything in check. And on the surface of the story, all that aside, it's a really, really cool creature, Black Ops monster story that I really, really enjoyed. And I love these kinds of books, so it's cool to see that they're still writing them. So, Dean Crawford, much credit to you, sir. But anyway, The Chimera Secret. Have you read it? If so, what did you think? Give me some of your thoughts. Let me know. If you have not, I will leave links in the description section below where you can go pick it up, check it out, give it a read, come back, give me some of your thoughts, let me know what you think. And if you have read Watchers, by the way, and you've read The Chimera Secret, or you're going to read The Chimera Secret having already read Watchers, let me know how you feel. Like, do you agree that it kind of, exists within kind of the same sphere as that story, and how they kind of, I think, really work well together and kind of, playing on these fears that we all have. And I still think to some degree have to this day. Maybe not of the government making monsters, but more or less the government keeping dark secrets, as it were. I don't know. It's a cool. Both are really good stories, and both I think are a great analysis on kind of our paranoia and kind of our history with government institutions, if you will. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!